When John Wilkes Booth shot Abraham Lincoln back in 1865, it was an event that just completely rocked America to its core. The official story that came out was that a pretty small group of Confederate sympathizers was behind it all. But almost right away, other ideas, other theories, started to bubble up, pointing to a much bigger, much more sinister plot. Today, we're going to unravel those theories.
And our whole journey really starts with this question, which was asked on Reddit. It gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Was the official story the whole story? Or, like with so many huge national tragedies that came later, did people immediately start looking for some secret hand, some hidden force guiding everything? So yeah, let's pull on that thread and see where it takes us. Okay, so first things first, we have to understand the story that the government told the American people. This is the official version, the one that ended up in all the history books. I mean, just think about how fast all of this happened. On April 14th, Lincoln is shot. By the next morning, he's dead. Only 2 weeks later, Booth himself is tracked down and killed. And less than a month after that, a military trial is already happening. By July, 4 people are hanged. It's just bam, bam, bam. The message from the government was crystal clear. This is over. This chapter is closed. But was it really that simple?
And here's where it gets really interesting. The government took a pretty controversial approach. They basically argue that since Washington, D.C. was technically still a war zone, the assassination was an act of war. And that allowed them to try the 8 suspects in front of a military commission, not a regular civilian court. The rules there were totally different. To get a conviction, you only needed a majority vote, and for the death penalty, only 6 of the 9 judges had to agree.
So who were these 8 people? Well, the government cast a really wide net. 4 were executed, including Mary Surratt. She owned the boarding house where the plotters would meet, and she became the first woman ever executed by the federal government. 4 others got prison time, like Dr. Samuel Mutt. His big crime? Setting Booth's broken leg while he was on the run. So this was the picture the government painted, a neat circle of 8 conspirators. Case closed.
Right. So with the executions and the prison sentences, the official story was locked in. But for a country just shattered by civil war and the murder of its leader, the idea that it was all just the work of a famous actor and his little band of helpers, it just didn't feel big enough. It didn't seem to match the scale of the tragedy. And the questions, well, they started almost immediately.
And that leads us right into our first major conspiracy theory. The idea that this wasn't some rogue operation at all, but a final, desperate act of war, planned by the highest levels of the Confederacy.
And this is the question that changes everything. Was John Wilkes Booth the king on the chessboard, making all the moves? Or was he just a pawn, being pushed around by a player hidden in the shadows? Because if he was a pawn, that opens the door to a much bigger, much more organized plot.
To really get this theory, you have to know about a very real and very dangerous group, the Confederate Secret Service. Now, this was no amateur hour. We're talking about a sophisticated, well-funded network of spies. They had agents all over the North, running these elaborate operations out of Canada. They were basically a shadow government at war.
And just look at the kind of stuff they were doing. This wasn't just passing secret messages. They were waging a secret war of sabotage. They invented these bombs that looked like lumps of coal to blow up Union ships from the inside. They planned to set fire to major northern cities. There's even evidence linking them to early biological warfare plots. I mean, when you're already doing all that, is assassination really that big of a leap?
So the theory goes something like this. The Confederate Secret Service first recruited Booth, a famous actor who could move in high society circles, not to kill Lincoln, but to kidnap him. The plan was to trade the president for Confederate prisoners of war. But as the war started to go really badly for the South, the plan supposedly changed. It escalated from kidnapping to a full-blown assassination of the Union's top leaders.
And get this, historians who've dug into this theory even point to what they say was the code phrase for the whole operation, come retribution. It just sounds like a coordinated, top-down mission, doesn't it? A final strike as the Confederacy was falling apart. But some people believed the plot wasn't just coming from the South, but from way across the ocean.
Okay, so if you thought a secret government plot was getting elaborate, you better buckle up for this next one. This theory claims the conspiracy didn't just go to the top of the Confederacy. It went all the way across the Atlantic, to the Vatican itself.
This pretty explosive claim comes from a guy named Charles Chiniquy. He was a former Catholic priest who became this very fierce anti-Catholic preacher. And in 1885, he published a book arguing that the real masterminds behind Lincoln's murder weren't Confederate spies at all, but the Pope and what he called his perfidious Jesuits.
So how on earth did he build this case? Well, he laid out a whole series of proofs. He claimed he was a close friend of Lincoln's and that Lincoln had supposedly told him he feared a Jesuit plot. He pointed to this formal letter the Pope had sent to the Confederate president as hard evidence of a secret alliance. He insisted all the conspirators were devout Catholics acting on orders. He even claimed a Catholic town had some kind of supernatural warning of the event. It was this massive, all-encompassing theory.
But, and this is a big but, when you actually hold Chinique's claims up against the actual historical record, the whole thing just completely unravels. For starters, only 4 of the 10 people involved in the plot were even Catholic. John Wilkes Booth himself, he was actually a member of the Know Nothing Party, which was fiercely anti-Catholic. Did Lincoln fear a Catholic plot? Nope, he publicly condemned that exact party. And here's the real nail in the coffin. The Pope actually helped the US government by sending back a conspirator who had fled to the Vatican to hide.
So, we've got the official story, we've got a plausible theory about a bigger Confederate plot, and we've got this wild theory about a global religious conspiracy. What does it all really mean, and why do these stories still stick around?
It really all comes down to the scale of who you're blaming. The official plot is small, contained, almost too simple. The Confederate theory expands that circle of blame to a whole shadow government, and the Jesuit theory, it goes global, blaming this powerful, ancient institution. It seems like for an event that was as huge and world-changing as Lincoln's death, a lot of people just needed a bad guy that felt equally huge.
And that pattern, right there, is the key takeaway. This need to find a powerful, hidden hand behind a shocking national tragedy is a theme that just keeps popping up in American history. We saw it after the JFK assassination, and we saw it all over again after 9/11. The idea that one single person or a small group could change the course of history is, for a lot of people, just not as comforting as the idea of some grand, understandable conspiracy.
And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. Why do these theories have so much power over us? Are we just trying to find some meaning in absolute chaos? Is it a deep distrust of what we're officially told? Or maybe, is it that the simple, often messy truth is just a lot harder to accept than a complicated but captivating story? It's a question that's just as relevant today as it was back in 1865.